Greetings. So this time I'm going to talk about Amos chapter 7 verses 14 and 15. Then answered Amos and said to Amaziah, I was no prophet, neither was I a prophet's son, but I was a herdman and a gatherer of sycamore fruit. And the Lord took me as I followed the flock. And the Lord said unto me, Go prophesy unto my people Israel. So what does this verse mean? Amos was not this he didn't come from some kind of rich family, educated family or anything like that. He had some regular job, like most guys, but he was called to the ministry to be the Lord's prophet. So the Lord, he takes people from all sorts of, all walks of life for his service. Christians come from all sorts of backgrounds, and God can use your background to serve him, to do his work. It's very important. And generally, God doesn't, like people from a very wealthy background, very educated background, unfortunately, like you would think those are the most talented people. Those are the people that can serve the Lord the best. In theory, yes, but practically speaking, these people tend to get distracted by the things of the world and sometimes they're just too smart for God. They're too smart to do something for the Lord. So you never want to be too smart to serve the Lord or to think it's beneath you. That's why it is difficult for, like it's in the Bible, it's really difficult for a wealthy man to be saved, because there's just plenty of distractions. There's just too many distractions for someone from a wealthy, educated background. But Amos here, he was a gatherer of sycamore fruit. So let me demonstrate it. That would be like a McDonald's worker, a McDonald's worker, or someone else working at some cheap minimum wage job or close to minimum wage, and God says, I want you to be a pastor of a church. People ain't gonna like, but yeah, like, no, these are the kinds of, like, this is who God wants in his ministry. He doesn't care what your background is. In fact, the more humble your upbringing, the better you are probably going to do. Some of the best pastors and preachers, you might think they're just they just grew up some kind of redneck, like hillbilly upbringing, really, but they were some of the best preachers, because that's generally what happens. God doesn't take the people that, from the surface would look like, oh, amazing, these are going to be the best people. No, it's usually the people you wouldn't think of. That's who God calls into the ministry. So yeah, like, I had one of my Bible teachers says, like, whenever I run into a student, one of the Bible students, that's just a little weird, like he just doesn't really fit in, just kind of an oddball, he says to himself, you know what, I bet that is who's going to end up being a good preacher. It's gonna be the weirdo. He's like, that's the guy God's gonna call. It's the weirdo. So God, God just calls all sorts of people. David was a shepherd. God likes shepherds. Actually, in the Bible, if you look at like who did God use in the ministry, a lot of them were shepherds. That tends to be like a really good job, to later be in the ministry. So that's generally who God calls, some people from a humble upbringing. Because if you come from a humble upbringing and you're not proud, then you're more likely to listen to the Lord. If you think you know better than the Lord and you're smart and you know better, then God's going to have a hard time using you. If you're always fighting the Lord, when God says do this, you're like, nah, I think I know better. So, it doesn't work quite like that. That's why, just being educated and smart is not good. If you just have head knowledge but not the right heart attitude, you're not going to go too far. God's not going to be able to use you. So that's what God picked. So he's like, go preach to my people. That's how he picked Amos. He's like, just someone with a really low upbringing. So whatever your upbringing is, just know the Lord can use you. You have a talent. God gave everybody a talent. There's a purpose. Just find out what it is. You need to pray about it. You need to call, like, what's my calling? Regardless of you're a man or or a woman, but you have a calling, and God called you to some kind of ministry, and it might be some kind of behind the scenes work. It might be out in the open, out in the spotlight, but it's different. It's different for everybody. And so you just have to, and it might be very different from someone else's calling. So that's why you can't really compare yourself to others. When you start comparing yourself to others, that's when you run into problems. You have to know, like, your standard is God. Your standard is the you of we should be looking for what God's telling you to do, and comparing yourself to the you of yesterday. So you're comparing yourself to yourself and what God, what you believe God wants you to do. The standard God set for you, that is what you should be comparing yourself against, not what other people are doing. If you compare yourself to other people, you're just going to get depressed. If you're going to get depressed because you're not doing as much as them, or you're going to get proud because you're doing more than a lot of people. So you're thinking, I'm doing pretty good. I'm doing more than most people, so that's good enough, right? So you're going to get either proud or depressed, or a mix of both. So you're not when you're not following the Lord, you're going to run into problems because you're going to be gravitating towards extremes, which is what people do when they're not following the Lord. They gravitate towards the extremes. So yeah, anyway, that's it. I'll see you next time.